Hello everyone, my name is Mohammad Tayyib, and in this video I'm going to share you how you can perform RFM analysis using Excel. I will step by step show you the steps that you need to follow to perform RFM analysis into it. So for that, let me jump on to slides to show you what actually RFM analysis is. So RFM analysis is basically a way to target the cluster of the customers. So in it, we actually create the cluster of the customers or segment of the customers. And how do we do that? We do that based on the customer's previous behaviors. So doing that actually helps us to improve customer retention and focus marketing effort. So in RFM analysis, we have three components, or you can say three metrics. Recency, which means how recently was the customer last purchase. So let's say a customer made a last purchase on Friday and today is Monday. So the customer has made purchase in the last 3 days, right? So then we have the frequency, which is basically the number of transactions that a customer made. So let's say customer ABC has done 5 transactions. So the number here would be 5. And then we have monetary, which is the sum of all the revenue that is generated from a customer. So these components will actually help us to perform RFM analysis. And then we have reason behind that why it's needed. It's used to target specific cluster of customers to make the best of our budget. So let's say we have a limited budget available and we want to target specific customers. So we can use segments to truly segments our customers, and then we can target specific customer segment. And then high level depiction of customers and high response rate. And then there are a couple of questions that we can answer using RFM analysis. So let me jump onto the Excel sheet where I'll show you the steps to perform RFM analysis. So I have this data set available where I have invoice number, the stock code, description of product, quantity, invoice date, unit price, customer ID. That is an important part because we need to have a customer ID or some sort of identification to customer, because it's an analysis that depends upon the customer ID, or the customer needs. So then we have country, date, and total revenue is the calculated column that I did for quantity and unit price. The multiplication of it's so simple. So next we have, let's say, as you guys can see, invoice number is getting repeated. The reason behind that is within a transaction, or you can say invoice number, a customer has bought multiple products. So that's why it's getting repeated. And then we have customer ID. So in order to calculate the R value, which I showed you, which is nothing but let's say the recent value or recent date the customer made a purchase. So let's say I want to calculate the recent date the customer made a purchase. So for that, I can, simply calculate the maximum of invoice date by the customer ID. And let's say I want to calculate, and by the way, using that invoice date maximum, I can use any date, or let's say today date, to refer and calculate the days. And then we have monetary and frequency value. So let me jump onto the pivot table. For that, I've used pivot table. In pivot table, let me turn on the field list here. So in this pivot table, I've actually used the invoice number, right? Sorry, let me first move on to the customer ID. I simply added customer ID in the rows because I want the data by customer ID. And then in order to calculate the recency value, I've added date in the values column, and I've actually used maximum because I want to calculate the maximum date, right? And other than that, I have added the invoice number in this column. And here, as you guys can see, I've used distinct count, not a count, because when we will use simple count, that would give a wrong number, because as you guys can see, invoice number is getting repeated here. So we should be using distinct count. And by the way, by default, pivot table don't have an option to, uh, do distinct count. For that, you will actually have to check in the box available when, simply insert the pivot table. So then, so that's let me actually show you. You will just click insert, and here you'll have to add this data to data model options check-in. that will actually enable to do the distinct count. And by getting that option enable, by default, it will not have an option to distinct count. So you'll have to right click on the column and then summarize values by distinct count. So this way you will do the distinct count inputs. And then we have the revenue. For that, I just added the total revenue in this value and then simply did the sum. So now that I have all these three values available, three columns available, so I'll just copy and paste it here, which I've actually done here. So I have customer ID, the last purchase date. It's nothing but the same this column. I've actually filtered out the blanks because there are some rows in my data set where customer ID is not populated. So I just filtered it out just because, if any row don't have like customer ID, so what would be the benefit? We should be like targeting customers. So let's say if we don't have any customer ID, then how would we target that customer? So that's why I've excluded that. And other than that, I will just rename the columns. Maximum of date, I've renamed it to last purchase date. And then recency, it's basically recency that I've added here. Sorry, not recency, it's a frequency that I've added here. That is a custom column that I've created. I'll show you later. So last purchase date is basically this column. And then I have frequency, which is basically this column. And then I have monetary, which is basically this column. So I have these three columns. And one thing here is, let's say using the pivot table, I have calculated the maximum of date. But having the maximum of date is not sufficient number. So we should be either calculating like some sort of days or even month. So for that, I've actually used the unit of days to see how many days have been passed the customer made a last purchase date. So for that, I just did the date difference and then added the unit of day here. And as you guys can also observe, I'm actually using this maximum date as a reference to calculate the number of days. The reason behind that is in my data set, the maximum date available is 10, 12, 20, 2011. So let's say if I use today date here, today function to get the today date, that number obviously will be a bit larger just because right now it's 2025 going on. So that's why I've used this maximum date to, get some lower numbers or, good numbers. But you guys can use that. It all depends upon your business use case. So that's how I calculated the recency, which is basically the number of days the customer made a last purchase, then frequency calculated from this pivot table, and then monetary, which is also from this pivot table. So now that I have all these three values, what I can do now is I can use these values to give a score. And for that, I can use different scores. Like I can use from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. Again, it all depends upon your business case. So I've actually used 0 to 9 here. And how did I calculate the score? For that, I used the percent rank dot in function where I provided an array which it will be using to understand the distribution. And then out of the array data available, I've actually referred C4. It will say like out of all the numbers available in this data set, uh, how or like how much score I will give to 326. So that's how it's doing that. So yeah, another thing or twist you can say here is uh, a- in our score, we need to have some little reverse case. So let's say if we have larger recency number, does that means we need to provide the maximum score? No, absolutely not. Because let's say if you look at here, three shows the customer recently made a purchase was 3 days ago. So here we have given 9 scores, but let's say using simple this formula would give him a 0 or even 1 score, which we don't want that. So that's why I've actually used one minus here to reverse the relationship here. Let's say lower the number means higher the score, and higher the number means lower the score. And then I've actually multiplied it by 9 just because by default percent rank in will give the number in from 0 to 1. So in decimal format, like from 0 to 1, that number can be 0.5 or 0.6 or 0.7. So that's why I multiplied it by 9. So let's say if you want to calculate the score from 0 to 5, you can simply replace 9 by 5. This way it will give the score from 0 to 5, like as you guys can see here, right? So let me just undo that. And then I just did a round because otherwise the numbers were in decimal format. So I just want to have a ranking, or you can say numbers. So again, using the same percent ranking function, I've calculated the F value. So for that, I've actually referred the D column here. But this time, as you guys can see, I haven't used the 1 minus here, right? So next we have the M value. The same here I'm referring the monetary value and then multiplying it by 9. So this way I've got R, F, and M value. I just concatenated it. You guys can, note it doesn't matter. So but the important thing here is actually segmenting the customers based on the R, F, and M value that we have created. So here I've actually used multiple if else conditions. And again, that also depends upon your business case, how many segments you want to have, and what's the criteria in each segment. So let's say I'll just give you an overview. So let's say I say if R score is greater than equal to 8, F score greater than equal to 8, and then M score greater than equal to 8, I will segment that customer as champion because he is the one who is leading in all these three scores. And then I can have different criterias like who should be the loyal customer, who should be the potential loyalist. So this way I can use multiple if else conditions to segment our customer. I will definitely share the file in the description. You guys can refer this formula. So this way I will get the uh, segments by each customer. So now that, as you guys can see, I have actually classified each customer, his or her segment. So next I can, definitely do some visualization to see how many customers in each segment. So let's say I have larger number is other, and then the need retention, loyal customers, champion customers. So based on that, I can target, specific customers, or, specific group of clusters or segments. So I've actually written some definition of each segments that I've used here. So let's say I've used loyal here. So for that, I've actually defined as frequent purchasers. So we can, perform some sort of marketing strategies here, based on different segments of the customer. So yeah, that's it. In terms of RFM analysis, how you can perform it here. I'll share this file link in the description. You guys can always refer to it and the formulas that I've used. So yeah, thank you so much.